Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. On this week's episode, we look into confidence men and how they are affecting the narrative. Let's get started. Recently on this podcast, we did an episode called Nobody Cares Anymore. And the concept behind this episode, if you haven't heard it, is the fact that people around the world are kind of getting tired of the old message that everyone's been putting out. The pro-Pally lies that we've been hearing have been falling flat with many people. People who didn't really care about this issue in the past and only came out because the media was lying to them about what was going on. On this episode, I wanted to go a little bit further into this issue because we've seen it pretty much for over a year at this point. Many of you yourselves have probably seen it, and that is the issue of confidence men, which in short is con men. Many of us are used to the term con men in the sense of ripping you off, stealing your money. If you think about the old-fashioned 3-card Monty you'd see on the street, that's kind of a setup, right? You can't win. It's a trick. And these confidence men got their name from the fact that they had such confidence in the things they were saying. They could lie to your face so well, with such a smile. The way they speak to you, you just have to believe it. Many people who have committed fraud, for example, are con men. They have sold you a story, they've sold you an idea, and none of it's true. And so on this episode, we're going to talk about the con men that we've been seeing for over a year, some of which we've talked about on the show before, but we're going to see them in action. And I'm going to play some clips for you. We're going to talk about the way they work and the way that they're able to succeed in getting this false narrative out and trick so many people. Hopefully by the end of this podcast, you might be able to recognize it and call it out a little more, but also it might be able to give you that confidence yourself on how to disrupt these narratives that are completely untrue. One of our most favorite and most often referenced confidence men is Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi Hasan has been a poster boy for the Palestinian cause. He works for Al Jazeera, which cares only about the Palestinians as far as they can demonize Israel. And he's on every broadcast from Piers Morgan to CNN, making sure to spread the word of the terrible Israeli government. And what is really interesting about Mehdi is the fact that he is not only a confidence man with this booming confidence and smugness to him that makes you think that if you go against him, then you must be an idiot because he is just smiling and he's got so many facts that who am I to say that what he's saying is wrong? It's part of his style is speaking really quickly, spouting off a whole bunch of facts, most of which are untrue and unproven, until you just go, I guess you must know more than me, so I'll accept what you say. But funny enough, at the same time, he uses this holier than thou, oh, woeeth me, for anybody calling him out or questioning his facts or his information. The first clip is from Piers Morgan, who you'll notice plays a very large role in today's podcast because for better or for worse, he does like to have a multitude of information on his shows, but he platforms many people who probably shouldn't have a platform because of their very open anti-Semitism. But that aside, here we have some points from Mehdi Hasan on Piers Morgan.
I don't think it's irrelevant that you have a terror group on your doorstep who are wedded to your extinction. Why is that irrelevant?
I think the language you use is loaded, Piers. You say, on your doorstep. Do you know they did a poll of Americans a while back who thought that Palestinians were occupying Israel? When we talk about this stuff, we make it sound like Israel is the one being occupied, besieged. Israel's the one that's occupying the West Bank, Gaza, the longest military occupation in the world, going back to 1967. Israel is the country that occupied southern Lebanon. I mean, everything, the world did not begin on October the 7th. 1978, Israel invades southern Lebanon. 1982, Israel invades southern Lebanon. Sabra and Shatila massacre. 2006, Second Lebanon War, murder 100 people.
But you always make it sound like they're just doing this for the sake of it. They're not.
What are they doing it for?
Well, they've been provoked by Hezbollah.
Hezbollah didn't exist in 1978, Piers.
OK, I'm talking about the specifics of going on now.
I know some of you might have had your head spinning at that clip, at how fast he talks. It's a very big thing that he does to kind of confuse people or to not even let them speak. You can notice that he barely breathes when he speaks in order to take up all of the time and not allow someone to question him. But you'll also notice that he just rattles off facts after facts after facts to the point where obviously you are unable to talk about any of these facts because he's moved on so quickly. So he just spitfires a bunch of facts out, which, by the way, we'll get to in a second. They are not accurate. But you'll notice that the initial question was about how Israel should deal with having a terrorist group on their doorstep. And the first thing Mehdi does is change the topic completely, talking about whether or not it counts as them being on a doorstep or not being on a doorstep, and then goes into occupation, as if that really makes any difference to the fact that they commit terror against a sovereign nation. Either they did the terrorism or they didn't. It has nothing to do with if they're actually next door neighbors or if there's an occupation. Yes or no, did they do the terrorist attack? Does Israel have the right to defend itself? And we'll get to that in a minute. But the facts that he uses are so misleading and so wrong, but there's no time to dispute them. And I hate to give Piers Morgan a hard time, but the fact that Piers Morgan isn't obviously up to date enough on the history, he really can't defend against this spitfire of misinformation. He also brings up this really dumb idea that Americans think that occupation is the other way around, as if that has any relevance whatsoever. It's just kind of a straw man argument he's creating, just to get into the occupation that isn't actually an occupation. And we've talked about that on the podcast before. If you're interested in that topic, go back and listen to our old episode for more details. You will also notice in that clip how he rattles off another occupation, supposedly, that is in Lebanon in the 1970s, that Israel occupied southern Lebanon for apparently no reason. The funny thing is when they use this term, life didn't start on October 7th, they use it, but they don't actually care about it. They want to only use the dates that matter for them. He's left out the reason why any of these things happened. He didn't talk about the fact that the Palestinian Liberation Organization in southern Lebanon started a war that caused Israel, just like now, to go into Lebanon to defend themselves. This whole thing is just a bunch of random statements of dates and facts that are misleading. And because you don't have time to go over them, they seem to make a lot of sense to someone who doesn't know. He also loves to bring up Sabra and Shatila massacre as if that is something that we should talk about. But he doesn't talk about it. He just rattles off some name. It seems like it's a terrible thing. These massacres were actually done in Lebanon by Lebanese Christians against a refugee camp in Lebanon. Had nothing to do with the Israelis. The only time people complain that the Israelis, quote, should have tried to stop the Lebanese Christians from killing the Palestinians. They never blame the Lebanese Christians who did the massacre in response to the fact that the PLO entered Lebanon after being kicked out of Jordan, destabilized their country, and started a war with Israel. That was the Palestinian Liberation Organization in those refugee camps, like you see today in Gaza, in the West Bank. And he blames the Israelis for it, not the Christians. And because we don't get into that, it sounds pretty bad, like Israel must have done a couple of massacres. This is the definition of a confidence man. Someone who is so sharp and quick and sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But if you even scratch the surface, even Piers Morgan, you asked him some pretty basic questions, it still didn't hold up. And this became incredibly clear when Piers Morgan actually asked him, what do you think the Israelis should have done after October 7th? And here's his answer.
I'm curious what you think Israel could do that would pass your test.
Probably not much. I'm as close to a pacifist as you can get. I think you only use
pacifism
force
is not
to defend yourself.
Everyone else to attack you and to rape and murder and pillage you, to fire rockets all year.
Who's raping and
You don't think that's what Hamas did on October 7th?
I thought we were talking about Hezbollah.
And here you can see he very quickly wanted to change the topic when he accidentally told the truth and got caught. And the last thing you'll notice in this clip is when Piers Morgan actually tries to fight back against him, saying none of what you're saying really makes sense because Hezbollah started to kill Israelis before Israel even stepped foot in Lebanon. He kind of converts into this sort of cheeky, smug, passive-aggressive type of way of talking, where at the end he sort of says, well, I don't know why Hezbollah is attacking Israel. Why do you think they're attacking Israel? And we'll see this type of humor used as a way of making people feel stupid for going against them with our next quote-unquote guest on our episode. You could see this very strong-willed, confidence man just telling everybody whatever he wants without any concerns or any fear, and that works for him. That's his style. But it's funny when he's questioned to a point where he doesn't like it, you'll notice that he switches from being this confident person into a, oh my goodness, how dare you say that about me? I am so hurt by what you're saying. It is quite incredible to play the victim and the aggressor at the exact same time. Let's check out this clip from CNN.
No, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians, so I'm used to it.
Yeah, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is
Did
that...
you just say I should die?
You should not.
No,
Did you just say I should be killed?
No, I did not say that. No, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Did your guest just say I should be killed on live TV?
I said I hope
Guys,
you're...
let me just stop.
You said you hope my beeper doesn't go off.
Because you said I'm a big supporter
of the Palestinians.
of Hamas.
Guys, let me
I said
stop.
Palestinians.
Are you?
Listen to the outrage of Mehdi Hassan. It starts off with what it seems like is an attempted joke by Mehdi to say, oh, I'm a supporter of the Palestinians, so therefore everyone believes I'm a terrorist. And then the other guest responds with what appears to be a joke and saying, well, I hope your beeper doesn't go off because he apparently supports terrorism, which kind of is true, but maybe he shouldn't have said it on TV. But it's just the reaction of this confident man who nobody can shake him. He knows all of his facts. He knows all of his information. But the minute that he senses that he can somehow use this against you to be able to call himself the victim, he goes all in. And he just seems to be clutching his pearls, so shocked. He keeps asking the host and other people like, wow, did he just ask me to die on camera? Did he ask me to be killed on camera? Just repeating it over and over because that's another tactic he uses. It's kind of like the Islamophobia thing that we've talked about on this podcast before, where if you ever dare question anything that has to do with a Muslim country that does bad things or a Muslim person who espouses bad ideas, it's Islamophobic, even to talk about it. This is kind of his way of doing the Islamophobia thing where, oh my goodness, are you saying that I should die? I'm a Muslim and I support the Palestinians and you're telling me I should die? He seems so shocked by it. When ironically, he himself started this whole segment by saying, I'm cool with it. I'm used to people calling me terrible things because of my stances. But then the minute you call him out on those stances, he's hurt so badly that he needs to repeat it multiple times. I could go on for hours about Mehdi Hassan and his techniques of taking over conversations, listing off facts. One of his favorites is to list off people who have been quoted, like he'll use an Israeli newspaper article or an Israeli minister or an Israeli organization and say, this person says this person says that. And he loves to do that because, again, if he rattles off enough names and people saying bad things about Israel, it just sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But all he's doing is rapid firing random out of context things and trying to support his arguments without actually supporting his arguments. He's just listing off a bunch of things that you don't have time to fact check. But our second person on this podcast episode is going to be more of the humorous side. We talked a minute ago about how Mehdi likes to sometimes use humor in order to make you feel stupid about what you think. If you dare go against me, then don't you sound really stupid compared to what I'm saying? Nobody is better than Bassam Youssef, an actual comedian. A comedian from Egypt who fled for his life from the radical Islam that he now somehow supports. But for this podcast episode, I'm just going to talk about his style, the way he argues using humor, and we'll listen to some of his clips.
First of all, what is your reaction to what happened on October the 7th?
Oh, it was terrible, of course. I mean, we kind of get our news kind of also secondhand because, you know, my wife's family, they live in Gaza. They have cousins and uncles there, and their house also was bombed. We haven't been able to communicate with them for the past 3 days. Communication are lost. So we don't know actually what is the, how are they doing, but, you know, we're used to that. I mean, it's just like, it's very repetitive. We're used to that. We're used to them being bombed every time and moving from one place to the other. You know, it's just like those Palestinians, they're very dramatic. Israel killing us. But they never die. I mean, they always come back. You know, they're very difficult to kill, very difficult people to kill. I know because I'm married to one.
You notice here how Bassam very much uses humor. It's his thing. It's his way of deflecting. But immediately, he takes the conversation away from October 7th, tries to poke fun and make a joke and completely change the conversation to about the issues in Gaza and how pretty much we should just kill all of the Palestinian people and the people of Gaza because, we need to kill them anyway. They're all terrible. It's this sort of self-deprecating humor that makes you feel like, oh, so if I support the idea of killing Hamas, is that what I sound like when he says what he's saying and he's obviously making a joke about it? Then I maybe shouldn't be saying that we should kill Hamas because then I'm going to sound bad. This style of humor that he uses is an attempt to not only deflect from the actual question, which he refuses to answer, but he also makes sure to poke fun at anybody who dare speak against him or give an opposing view. And there are plenty of opposing views that are more than rational about Hamas, what they did on October 7th, and so on and so on. And in another interview that he had done, which I won't play for you, he was asked again, what would you have done differently on October 7th? If you were Israel, what would you do? And his response was, not this. And then the host who was asking him the question said, well, what would you do? He responded, not this. And he was asked multiple times, and he refused to give an answer. Because if he can't poke fun at it, he'll just deflect the question completely. I wouldn't do what Israel's doing, but I won't come up with any other options on what Israel has a right to do. And in this same interview, Piers Morgan asks him that question again to see what his answer is. And see here if you can spot the deflection and the humor that he attempts to do.
If you were Israel, what would you...
If I was Israel.
If you were Israel and that had happened to you, what would you think would be the appropriate way for the country to respond?
I would do exactly like Israel did, kill as many people as possible since the world is letting me do it. I mean, I can do it because I can.
Again, you can hear the humor and the attempt to be sort of sarcastic in order to make anyone who agrees with the idea of taking out Hamas sound stupid. How dumb of a thing would that be to say that? He's kind of mocking the people on the other side of the argument who are saying that we need to get rid of Hamas with this humor that he does in order to make you feel dumb. So unlike Mehdi Hassan, who's the confidence man through his statistics and his facts that you don't have time to go over and see if he's telling you the truth or not, Bassam Youssef likes to use humor to completely deflect and to make anybody who possibly thinks that the other side could be right thinks twice. Because, I don't want to be sounding like I'm supporting what he's saying as a joke, because he's painting this portrait of anybody who's against him sounds like this. And he does it with such a smile and such sarcasm. It is actually legitimately a work of art. The way that Bassam Youssef uses his humor in order to try and make other people think twice about opposing him is no different than Mehdi Hassan. They just use different tactics. But the last person I'm going to have on this podcast is someone who doesn't really use the finesse or the intelligence. This person does a little bit of the rapid fire, but just goes for complete scorched earth on the interviewer. And for many of my listeners, they may already know the online YouTuber Mohammed Hijab, who is brash. He has no class. He dresses in nice suits to try and cover up the fact that he's like a terrible human being. But you'll hear his style in these clips.
Sure. Can we all agree that Hamas and Hezbollah are a bad thing?
I can agree that the Western man, has tried to use social constructs like terrorism to try and absolve themselves from all the things that they.
What would you call them, Hamas and Hezbollah?
Well, I mean, just like any human being. Just like any human being, they can sometimes be oppressive and they can sometimes be on the right side of history.
Most human beings do not do what Hamas did on October the 7th.
Well, in the Zionist entity, they do. And they do worse than that.
They don't.
They don't.
Israel's never committed an atrocity on that scale.
On what scale?
On that scale.
Explain. What scale?
Killing 1,200 people.
They've killed 40,000.
Sorry, in one day. Massacring
they've killed 40,000
Israelis that could get their hands on.
Hold on.
Kidnapping children.
On the 23rd of September, what happened?
Holocaust
on the
survivors.
23rd, we were talking about October
raping
the 7th.
and abusing women, beheading people. Oh, you don't think that happened, do you?
Well, hold on. Are we talking over each other? It's 2-on-1 now.
8,000 people were attacked.
No problem. On the 23rd
One of the most horrendous terror attacks.
Is this going to be a monologue or is it a dialogue?
History. I'm telling you some facts.
I know the facts.
I may not like it, but I'm telling you them.
What's wrong with you? Why are you not looking at me again? You're crying. Are you crying?
Because the viewers are seeing the three of us together.
I see that there's tears in your eyes.
There are no tears in my eyes.
What's going on?
There's a slight sense of exasperation.
I apologize for those of you listeners who might get anxiety from listening to that clip. I know it's a little bit crazy and all over the place. There's arguing, there's name calling, and this is sort of a summary of Mohammed Hijab's style. You'll notice he wears a nice suit whenever he goes on TV. You'll notice that he talks really fast and he has this pompous air about him, always sitting up really nice and high as if he knows what he's talking about, and he'll spout off the typical talking points that he hopes will never be questioned. But even if they are, he starts to essentially become a troll. It's probably because that's how he started his career on YouTube, essentially being a troll and being anti-Israel and whatever it might be. And so he's taken that style into, I wouldn't even call it a debate. This is just a conversation. And if anyone challenges him, the first thing he does is begin to troll. And it gets really pathetic at the end there when he starts accusing Piers Morgan of crying because you can't handle the things that I'm saying, so you must be crying. You're crying, you're crying. Like, it is infuriating how stupid he is. And it's this confidence that he has when he's just spouting off random numbers, random information. He doesn't let you talk. He starts becoming the interviewer himself, where he puts the interviewer now on the hot seat and starts asking them questions and making them defend themselves and turns the entire interview around. I'll give him credit. He's actually really good at it. And it's not a surprise that many people follow him, especially if you support his type of argument. Everyone loves a good troll. But what's amazing to me is that he's literally a real life troll. The way he argues, the way he debates with this smugness, this confidence, and the trolling seems to work. You could see even Piers Morgan can't really keep up with him and kind of gave up. He kind of at the end just sort of threw up his hands and was done with it. Mohammed Hijab might be the worst of the three examples that we gave today because he doesn't even pretend to be legitimate. He is more than happy at playing the clown and the troll. In the end, the point of this podcast is to kind of give you an example of the different types of con men that have been putting out the message around the world. Most of them, if not all of them, use complete disinformation and talking points, but they share them in different ways. The first way they like to share it is just by rapid firing random things that you don't have time or the ability to check and try and see if they're right or wrong. They kind of spitfire talking points at you to the point where you either get exhausted or just kind of accept it because clearly they're smarter than me. Look at all the facts they have. They must all be true because you wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't. Especially when you say it with a big smile and a nice suit on and you're on television. People sort of assume that you know what you're talking about. Why would you be on Piers Morgan if you didn't have some type of credibility? The other way they do it typically is by making fun of the situation, by degrading the Palestinians and acting as though that's the way we, as the pro-Israel side, act. I have never said the things that Bassem Youssef pretends that the Jews are saying. I don't feel any of those things. But by mocking the pro-Israel side, by making them sound terrible, if you've never talked to a person like me, you might believe that, wow, is that really what they feel? Oh, then I'm pro-Palestinian for sure. If I think the Israelis say, murder all the Palestinians, definitely I would be against that. And if you don't know any better about any of the facts that he's saying that are all misleading, you might side with him. Humor is a great way to try and mock the opposite side and therefore get people onto your side. And lastly, the troll style, we've all seen them online. I actually enjoy, as you know, going online, going in the comment section and trolling the trolls. But trolling in the real world is kind of sad and pathetic, but it seems to work. By someone like Mohammed Hijab putting the interviewer on the defensive, they're not able to ask questions of him and get him to actually answer it. Because every question he's asked, he spins it around and puts it on the interviewer. And therefore, he doesn't have to answer anything. You notice how angry he gets when he's actually put on the spot and made to answer a question, something he's not used to or doesn't like to do, because he realizes what he's going to say makes no logical sense or is talking points by Hamas. And I guess if you don't get your way, as a troll, You then go into ad hominem or personal attacks or accuse someone of crying, accuse someone of being a colonizer or an oppressor, essentially just knock them off their game and hijack the entire interview. Hopefully by the end of this podcast, you're able to spot these things when you see the interviews. There are some people who do it in a less obvious way, but also make you realize that there are a lot of people out there who are spreading misinformation on social media, on regular, normal media, and they seem confident. They seem like they know what they're talking about. Maybe they're dressed nicely. Maybe they have a lot of facts. But just because these confidence men are giving you facts and look like they know what they're talking about, doesn't mean they actually know what they're talking about. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.